All right. Okay, and if at any point I go too fast or you need me to repeat anything, just let me know. I tend to talk a little bit quickly when I get excited about things, so just let me know. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sam. I'm from Baltimore, and my Etsy shop is Sam's Little Shop, and my business is called Samantha's Doodles. I do all sorts of laser files. I do scoring files, single line files. I do engraving patterns, lots of florals. Pretty much dabbled in every type of file except for the really technical kerf related boxes and things like that. Those are not in my wheelhouse. But anything where I can draw, I love to do it. And these are just a couple examples of the work I've done. I've been in the laser world since 2020. I have a file membership that I started in 2022, and I've been fortunate enough to speak at a couple different events. I did Laser Craft Fest a few times. I was actually on the Riley Black podcast when they early on when they first came out. And I actually just got added to the creator program for Cuddle. So if you're a member of that, you're gonna start seeing some of my designs popping up. And then last but not least, I have a line of designed printed materials with Craft Closet. And you can get those printed on all sorts of different cores, whether it's acrylic or faux leather or MDF. So you might see my name pop up there as well. What we're going to get into today is we're going to talk about how handwritten keepsakes and being able to do personalized laser items can be an entire business in themselves, and how that's a potential niche that can really be great for people in our industry. Throughout, we're going to learn Procreate basics, kind of go over the different menus, the toolbars, the brushes that I think you should know. We're going to duplicate and edit a brush to give you some settings that might make it easier on you for people that have never used the program before. We are going to practice a handwriting trace. So if you don't have a piece of paper, when we get to this point, I'm going to ask that either you borrow one from someone next to you or you grab one from the back and you just have somebody write a couple words on paper. It could be your lunch order, it could be hi, my name is, it does not matter, but we're gonna do some practicing with tracing text together. And then we'll go over saving the file and kind of how to get it into the laser program. And last but not least, we're gonna talk about the other areas where Procreate really shines for laser creators versus where I would recommend just going straight to your vector programs. And that brings me to, there are some definitions that you may already know this might be kind of redundant for you, or you might not know them at all if you're new to lasers. But Procreate is what's called a raster program, and it works in pixels. So these are your, JPEGs, PNGs, any sort of photograph that you have is going to be based with pixels. And what our lasers use for cutting and scoring is a vector file. And so you can engrave a raster design that we make in Procreate, but if you want to do any sort of other functions with it, if you want to add an offset cut line or score certain elements of it, you're going to need to turn it into a vector. So to do that, we do what's called an image trace, and that is the computer's process of turning that pixel image into that vector file for your laser to read. And the only reason that I'm explaining this is because what we're doing today in this class, I'm going to refer to as a manual trace, and that's us doing it by hand. We're physically tracing and not just letting the computer do it for us. So just to clear that up, when you hear me say image trace, I'm talking about the computer, and when I say manual trace, it's us, the humans in this room that apparently talk with their hands a lot. But that's our process of converting something to a usable laser file. How many of you in here have used Procreate before? Okay, great.
Just barely.
Just barely? Who's never opened it? Is there anybody? Okay. Well, we're gonna get you to the point where you can open the app, create a new canvas, and get rolling and not feel scared of it, not have to worry about what all of the toolbars mean. It is a $12.99 one-time purchase. It's not subscription-based. You don't have to worry about with Adobe always, the subscription increases year after year. You pay for it once and you have it, and everything that you need is already in the app. So there's no in-app purchases. You can purchase brush presets elsewhere, similar to what you can do with Photoshop. But for laser purposes, you don't need to buy anything else. The app and the iPad, it's what you need to get started for our use for it. If you don't have an iPad and you are looking to get one, you can get any of these versions with a version of the Apple Pencil that will allow you to use Procreate to do what we're doing today. I use the Pro. You don't need to have the Pro model if you just want to dabble in it, if you just want to learn a little bit. It's just what I use because I use this more than literally anything, even my cell phone. I'm always on my iPad. You can ask my husband in the back. It's in my bag wherever I go all the time. So if that sounds like you and you have a plan to use it, get what you can afford that has the best storage and whatever size. But if you're on a budget, that's okay too. You can use Procreate on older versions, the minis, any different types. The only thing that I am going to recommend that you splurge on if you are on a budget is to get the Apple Pencil instead of a dupe version, a knockoff version. There is one reason and one reason alone is it has what's called pressure sensitivity, and it lets you change the thickness of your line based on how hard you press on the screen. And I've tried a bunch of the alternate versions. They work great for absolutely everything else, but that seems to be something that only the Apple version is able to offer. If you can't afford it, the budget options are fine. I got this one for $18 and it does just about everything else that the fancy version does. But if you're gonna do a lot of handwriting traces, if you want to get into a lot of drawing in the app for Tumblr wraps or other things, I do recommend that you get the Apple brand. And just because I think for if you plan to do any sort of handwriting or if you do brush lettering, I know a lot of people like to make signs and then put hand lettering on top of it, like the calligraphy or the big cursive letters. It works really well with that pressure sensitivity. But other than that, there's really nothing wrong with getting the Amazon version of the stylus. Now that all the boring stuff is out of the way, we can talk about handwritten keepsakes and what you can do in the laser industry with those. I'm sure if you've walked around the vendor room, you've seen Monarch Pine and her setup with all the gorgeous blanks. I'm actually wearing one right now that I engraved with my grandmother's handwriting, and that's the one in the picture. And there are, I don't want to say like infinite options, but there are so many things that you can do as keepsake gifts for your laser business. You could have an entire business just on making jewelry with handwriting to gear towards, wedding parties or memorial gifts. There are so many different markets that you can approach with any sort of personalized keepsake, and I think a lot of people don't realize how broad that actually is. I mean, if anyone in here is a parent, and my daughter is 19 months, she's not even 2 yet, and she's just learning that she likes to draw, and so we've got things all over our fridge that are just scribbles, and I'm like, she's Picasso, I love it. Parents are a huge market. If their kids are drawing or if they're writing for the first time and they don't want that cluttered fridge, you can do those ornaments with their kids' drawings, with their kids, to mommy, I love you. And it's gonna become something that they cherish because it's more than just, a magnet or more than just a bracelet, it's a memory. And so you can really turn these handwritten things into anything. I mean, if you have, my mom taught for 20 years, she was a special ed teacher, so I could get the kids to all sign a piece of paper, and then, if there's a room mom who engraves tumblers, you could make, a tumbler for the teacher as the end of your gift that's a little bit more personal without being, anything too crazy. For pets, you can do the same concepts with paw prints, nose prints, pretty much anything you can do I mean, you could partner with a vet and say, can I put a little display on your counter, and as people come in, you know, they can leave their orders here. There are sports things, you can do memorial gifts, you can do commemorative things for graduations or events or weddings. There's so much that you can do with handwriting, and it's so simple once you learn how to recreate it, that I think it's a skill that we should all know in our laser business, just to have in our back pocket. And I know a lot of the time, if you have a really nice, clean image to trace from, you can either put it in your Glowforge, you can take a picture and put it in your program, but there are a lot of other times where the only example of handwriting someone has is a napkin that has splotches all over it, or a recipe card that's been passed down and is ripped and covered in sticky stuff. And, you know, it gives you so much more control to do the manual trace than it does to just do an image trace. You don't have to worry about the shadows. You don't have to worry about stripes on the paper being, or lines on the paper being picked up by the computer as it traces it. And it just gives you a lot more precision, and it can also be quicker because you can pick and choose which parts of your reference that you want to use. And this is an example of that. I had a note from my grandmother. This is what I used on my bracelet, from an art show when I was in high school, and I'm not going to tell you how long ago that was, but it was dark and blurry, and I didn't really have a great picture of it. When I tried to do the trace in Adobe, it kind of, like, it gives you the general idea, but I would not say that that's legible by any means, and it also picked up part of the text above it. So I took it into Procreate, and in less than 5 minutes, traced it myself, and it looks so much more like the original, like her handwriting, that the middle one I would not wear myself. I would not gift to, you know, my family members. This one on the right, I think it looks just like her writing, and I think it turned out really nice. So I was able to have more control over how the image turned out than with the computerized trace. And since it's just engraving in this case, you don't need to convert it to a vector. You can just take that right into your laser program and engrave from there. So being able to do that manual hand trace gives you that control over it, and it sometimes makes the process easier than having to go in and do note editing and, you know, delete out the parts of it that you don't want and figure out why, you know, there's missing letters and the loop is gone. So it just gives you a lot more control. Another thing that it lets you do is to combine different elements. Say that someone comes to you and says, you know, my daughter-in-law really wanted to have her grandmother's, you know, something from her grandmother on her wedding day, but we only have a grocery list with her handwriting. Can you take that grocery list and pull different letters out and write out, I love you? And you can do that. You can take it into Procreate and use, they have like a selection tool that's similar to the lasso tool in Photoshop, and you can pick out each letter and create yourself a reference image to then trace on top of, and you can come up with something that you didn't previously have that exact text for. This was also from that art show that I did, and it was my grandfather's handwriting, and his catchphrase was good show. He would never say I'm proud of you. He was very, very soft-spoken, and so you knew you did good if he came up and said good show. And so he wrote in here good and show, and then there was a capital G. So I took the good, the show, and then that G, put them together, and was able to convert that into something that looks like he had written that out. It's similar to, I don't know how many of you have done those faceless portraits that were trendy a while back. I've seen a lot of people say, hey, can you add in a relative of mine who wasn't in this photo, and then we can have our whole family together in this image. It's the same concept as that. You can take what you do have and build on it and turn it into exactly what your clients and your customers are looking for. And that's something that we as, you know, laser business owners or UV printing or, you know, just anybody who can personalize items, we have that to offer, whereas they can't just go to, you know, Target and pick up something that has that kind of sentimental meaning. So it's a really cool thing to be able to offer to your clients, or, you know, we I do this for my family all the time, and we make all sorts of things. And for my nephew, for a Father's Day gift, we did his handprints, and we said best dad hands down, and I engraved the handprints. So you can make all sorts of really cool things once you get the hang of the process. And then last but not least, I mean, like I said, sometimes the recipes are not exactly the best. This one is faded. It's from 1988. And it has, there's lines in here, there's the pages and I don't know what that's called, the binding, and then the page number and elements that I wouldn't want if I was going to be printing this on a cutting board. So this was my dad's grandmother, she raised him, and so her cookbook is really special to him. And so I went through and manually traced it so that I can engrave it on something, and then he'll have that on something that's not as likely to fall apart as, paper. If you're baking and you spill something on it, you could lose the whole thing. So this way I could engrave him a cutting board or, a little recipe box, and he could keep the recipes in there, but then he has this kind of memorialized, and it's also going to last a little bit longer. You're not going to have the same risk of losing, a piece of paper that...
I have a question.
Yes.
Could you take that image that you did and use vinyl or sublimation and put it on a tea towel or something?
Yeah, I mean, I don't do sublimation, so I'm not entirely sure of the process, but if you can just take a PNG image and sublimate that, then absolutely. And if you wanted to do vinyl, you would just need to do a vector trace of it. But I mean, my favorite vector trace is Inkscape, and I don't use it for anything other than just my black and white image traces. I think it comes out fantastic every time. And so you could just put it in there, make it a vector, and then cut it out of whatever you wanted to use it for. But yeah, so I'm going to show you today how to do a quick handwriting trace. I'm going to show you how we can combine some different references, and then we'll talk about the other things that you can do with the skills that you learn doing these. So let me get into Procreate. So this is my Procreate screen, and each one of these squares is what they call a canvas, and that's just your workspace. It's the same thing as your artboard if you're in Illustrator, and you can pick the size, you can change, whether it's pixels or inches or DPI can be adjusted. But basically this is your home base and where you can find everything. At the top, there's this button here that will take you back. This is just more of my canvases that are kind of grouped. And then we've got these options over at the top on the right side. And so the one that we're gonna wanna do is click on the plus sign, and that is how we create a new canvas. So once you're in here, it has all of the different canvases that you've used before, and you can delete these out, you can rename them, you can do whatever you want to do with them. I don't really mess with it. I tend to use the same sizes over and over again. But if you want to create a new one, you can come up to this second plus sign. Oh, it's gonna make me sign back in. I was connected. Sorry about that. And then we can go ahead and create a new canvas. So I'm gonna make this one 10 inches by 10 inches. And you always want to use the highest DPI or dots per inch, because since this is a pixel-based program, you want it to have the highest quality, and you want to be able to export the best image that you can if you do end up needing to do an image trace. So mine, I've got it 10 inches by 10 inches and 300 DPI.
How did you get there again?
There is a plus sign in the top right,
Yeah.
and then right under that, there's a little black box that also has a plus sign. And so you just click on there and it pulls up.
And is 300 the highest DPI you could go?
I've never gone higher than that.
Typically.
But that's what I typically use, because that seems to kind of be the standard across when you're printing anything, and so that's just what I've stuck with.
I don't see the DPI. Where is that?
It's underneath the width and height dimensions. And then once we click create, it opens up our new canvas, and it's scaled to exactly what we wanted it to be with those settings that we just put in. And so I'm just gonna do a quick walkthrough of the menus and then we'll get into the actual tracing part. When you're in this space, if you come to the top left, can you see it? Yeah, it says gallery. You can't see it over there? Okay. Do you have your iPads? The very top left, it says gallery, and then there are 4 icons. Do you see where that is on your screens? Okay, so gallery just takes you back to where you have all your canvases. And then we've got a wrench icon. The wrench icon is your actions menu, and this is all color-coded and in that PDF that you guys downloaded at the beginning. So you don't have to feel like you have to write anything down. But it has add, and that's where we can add a photo, add a file. We can take a photo if you want to do it that way. And that's also where we have our cut and paste and copy options. It also has the canvas, which is where you can change the size of it. You can flip your canvas, and where you can turn on a drawing guide. And we'll talk about the drawing guide a little bit later, but what that does is allows you to use symmetry in your drawings. Under share, this is just what you would use once you're done with your project and you want to export it. I always export as a PNG, and 99% of the time I want to do that because I turn the background layer off, so it's just a transparent image with my drawing. The video tab is not really important at all in terms of lasering, but as business owners in this day and age, we all have to do marketing and social media. So this is a tool that's actually really fun if you want to share the process of your drawing. It records a time-lapse video for you. So you can export that video and then you can share that on your social media and say, hey, look, this is how I drew this in Procreate. Or you can pair that with the video of the actual engraving. So you can have, the time lapse of it being drawn and then the time lapse of it being created. And it just gives you some content that you can share as a fun, behind the scenes look. Under preferences, this is just where you can change if you like a light interface or a dark interface. You can change, there's this slider menu right next to, and it has that square in between those 2 sliders. You can move that to the other side. It's just general things that might make you more comfortable in the app. You don't really need to be messing with it unless something is really throwing you off. There is, the next icon over is a magic wand, and that is our adjustments. That's where we can change our color, our saturation. If our reference image comes in and it's too dark and we need to lighten it, we can use this menu to help us do that. The third icon is our selection tool, and it's got this freehand selection. So if you need to trace part of your image, you can use that to select it and then move it around however you need to. And then the cursor, which is the 4th icon, that one is just kind of like your mouse. You click on that when you're ready to move something. You can use it to scale things larger or smaller. And then on your right-hand side of the screen, we have the circle at the top. I know that's probably a little hard for you all to see, but there is just a circle at the very top corner, and that's our color picker. We can go in here and choose whatever color we want to draw with. I usually draw with black on white just because I find that's the easiest thing to do a vector trace of if I need to do one. But if you find it easier to draw in a contrasting color and then, change it at the end, you can do that as well. This also acts like a paint bucket tool, and so if you have a shape that is a closed shape, you can click and drag that color and it will fill whatever shape you dragged it into. Something that you won't be able to see on the screen, but I'll show you as best I can, is if you tap with 2 fingers, it does undo. So if you didn't like the shape that you drew, you can tap with 2 fingers. If you say, you know what, it's fine, I'll leave it, you can tap with 3 fingers and it redoes whatever step you undid. So those are the most important shortcuts. They're in your PDF that I gave you, but to tap with 2 fingers or 3 fingers for those gesture shortcuts. We have a layers menu just like you would in Adobe, just like you would in pretty much any program that I think we would all use with lasers. and you can add them, you can lock them, you can rename them. Pretty straightforward. I don't ever really name my layers. I just kind of wing it and leave it as layer 1 or layer 1 copy. If you like to be organized, you can change it and say this would be our trace layer. And then you can say, you know, this would be our reference layer. But that's just personal preference. The eraser tool is exactly what it says. If you draw something and you don't want part of it, you can take the eraser tool and just erase it back. You can go on the side with your slider and adjust the size, and this is for the eraser tool and whatever pen tool, brush tool we end up using, and you can increase the size of that as well. The one below it is the opacity slider, and what that does is it makes it more or less see-through. And for what we're doing, we want to keep that at 100 because we want it to be solid and not have any issues with our image trace if we have to do one. And then the last thing we need to know is our brush library. And I'm going to show you 2 brushes that I think are the most important in terms of laser use. They're the 2 brushes that I use for every single project. And when I go through some examples a little bit later, I'm going to show you which brush was used for each. But open up your brush library if you are in your Procreate app, and we're going to start under inking. So inking is near the top, and then you're going to scroll down until you find the studio pen, and it has kind of like a little tapered squiggle. This is my #1 brush that I would use every single day for every single project if I could only choose one. And so once we get here, what you're going to want to do, we're going to duplicate this brush and then edit one of the settings. But we want to duplicate it so that if you did need to go back to the original, it's still there and we haven't overwritten anything. So to duplicate it, you're going to slide to the left and then click duplicate. And so now it says Studio Pen 2 because I duplicated another one yesterday. But Studio Pen, yours will probably say Studio Pen 1. Then if you click on that, it brings up what's called our brush studio. This is where you can either create new brushes, you can edit existing brushes, you can change settings. This is where we're gonna find the one tool that I think is super helpful in getting comfortable with this program. Under the Brush Studio header, if we come down to stabilization, I know yesterday we had one person who couldn't find it in this spot, so let me know if anyone can't, but there is something called streamline. And I like to keep mine between 60 and 80%. I usually keep it around 70. What that does is it smooths the drag of your brush as you're going, and it makes it less wobbly if you have shaky hands. It makes it a little bit easier to make those curves. So I like to edit my streamline to about that 70% option, and it makes everything feel so much smoother, and it makes me feel more confident with my ability to create different shapes and curves without it looking a little crazy. That's the only thing that I would edit on that brush, but we're gonna do one more. Do you have a question?
My pressure and stabilization are both up, and you're saying none.
Yes. Do you have streamline in your column?
Yeah.
That's the one that we should be moving. So the main section is called stabilization, and then in stabilization, we're doing streamline.
Yes, and then my amount now is 70, but my pressure says max, and my stabilization says 74. Should
Oh.
those go down to 0?
No.
Okay.
It might be because I downloaded a version from an iPad that I bought years and years ago when Procreate first came out, but try it with just the streamline increased and we'll see how it feels for you, and then we can adjust from there.
It's not for everything else.
It what?
Mine says not for everything else in here.
So my
Okay.
mine-
Yours is the only.
I may have already screwed with it and didn't know.
You know what? See how it feels when we do our practice trace, and if you don't like it, you can turn them down and go from there. But see, messing with the settings, you just want to be comfortable with it. If there's anything else in there that you want to play around with, just duplicate the brush, do it on a new version, label it test or something, and see what you like best. It can't hurt anything. The second brush that we're going to edit is under calligraphy. So it is 4 down from inking, and it's about, I don't know, I'd say halfway down on your options. In this one, you're gonna wanna do the same thing where you duplicate it, and then we're gonna go in and we're gonna change that streamline again, which I've got this one at 71. Oh, monoline. I apologize. Yeah, monoline. I must have some extra ones in there. But what monoline means is that it's a consistent width no matter what. It does not get impacted by the pressure sensitivity that we talked about a little bit earlier. And I like to use this when I have a project that needs that consistent thickness throughout. And when you're cutting acrylic or cutting something that's a little bit more fragile and you need a thicker line, this helps you keep it consistent. The next setting that we're going to edit in this one is under properties. And
Adjusting the streamline amount?
yes, to the same thing, somewhere in the 60 to 80 range. I like to keep mine at 70. You don't have it?
Stroke properties.
Go under stroke path. Does it show under there? That's where,
That's what I'm on.
okay. And stabilization.
Oh, thank you.
Yesterday we had somebody who had it under stroke path and I had never seen it there. So sometimes I feel like the different versions or updates might not always be quite exact. But we're gonna do our stabilization amount to that, 70 plus or minus. And then we're gonna go to properties and we're gonna go under brush behavior and increase our maximum size. And so we're just gonna bring it up to like 175-ish. It's a slider, so it's hard to get it to be exact. Somewhere around there, you just want it to be a larger option. And I'll show you why once you're all finished with that. Properties, then you're gonna do, under the brush, it says max size. And I went to about 175-ish. And the reason that we do that is because with our original monoline brush, this is the smallest it can go, and this is the largest it can go. And the one that we just edited, the largest is a lot bigger. So if you have something that needs, somewhere in the middle between those sizes, this way you have more of a range and you can have that consistent thickness without having to go buy any special brushes that people say, oh, this one's great for that. You already have it, you just needed to increase the size that was available. Okay, does everyone have a piece of paper? If anyone needs one, there are notepads in the back and I've got a couple up here. And you can either write it for yourself, you can write it for your neighbor, but you just need a couple words. They can literally be nonsense. We're just gonna do a practice. All right, once you have it written, in your canvas that you opened up, if you go to that wrench, that actions menu, and click add, there is an option to take a photo. And then you can just take your iPad camera over top, see this has got a lot of shadows for me with all this setup, but you can just take a picture of your text, say use photo, and it will bring it right into your canvas. And I always like to kind of zoom in a little bit to make it fit better. But there is my handwritten note that just says Procreate class.
Can you go through that stuff again?
We're going to our wrench icon at the top. It's the actions menu. We're on that first section of it that says add, and then do take a photo. And then if you have a case, you'll just have to move it out of the way. Take a picture, and then it'll say add or confirm, or I can't remember the prompt, but then it'll just bring it right in. Yours is at the bottom? Oh, that's when it's selected, this menu comes up at the bottom. You can just click the arrow at the top to deselect it, or click anything else. But what that does is it's if you wanted to make it larger or smaller or rotate it, those are the tools right there for you, the selection menu, so to speak. But so this is going to be our reference image. If you want to, you can lock the image by swiping left and clicking lock. I don't ever really do that, but again, like I said, I don't really label my layers either, so it's personal preference what you would like to do. For handwriting traces, I like to use that Studio pen brush, and that's under inking again if you click on the brush at the top. And then I can come over to my slider, my size slider, and I'm gonna probably wanna start around 10 to 12%, just to kind of match the thickness of, I just used a ballpoint pen. If you're looking at your image and you say, wow, I took a terrible photo, this is so dark, and you want to do adjustments, you can click that magic wand and do hue, saturation, and brightness, and then it comes up with this menu at the bottom, and I like to just make it a little brighter, and you can lower the saturation too if that throws you off. Sometimes I like to work in black and white just to look at things a little bit differently. But that way this looks a little bit easier to read, and then it'll be easier to trace.
Where was
That is under the, there's a magic wand next to that wrench at the top on the left side, and it's under hue, saturation, and brightness. It should be, mine is the first one under adjustments. And then from here, I just make sure I'm on that new layer. And you can zoom in by using two fingers together like this and just spreading them apart, almost like, you know, pretend you have something stuck on your finger and you're trying to get it off. But you just spread your fingers apart to zoom in or to turn it, and you can pinch your fingers back together to zoom out. So as you're tracing, don't be afraid to move the canvas screen around. It will make it so much easier. That way you can see exactly what you're doing. And again, with those undo and redo tools, it becomes second nature the more that you do it. But so I'm gonna start my trace, and I'm just gonna use black just because I think it's easier for me to make out the difference. And then I just start tracing. For anything that's thicker, I usually put more pressure so that my line is thicker. And for anything here, like in the R that's kind of tapered at the end, you can lift up the pressure as you get to the end, and it will make it thinner. You can also adjust the thickness of your brush if you need to as you go. And I would just trace around my letters. So I'm just gonna do the first three, and then I'm gonna show you how you can kind of check your work. And obviously I'm going a little quick here, so I apologize that it's not gonna be perfect, but it's all right. Once you have your text going, if you wanna check your work, so to speak, you can come back up to your layers menu and take two fingers and tap on the layer you're using, and it'll bring up what is called your opacity slider. And you can lower the opacity, which means it's more transparent, that you can kind of see through it. And you can go in closer and see where you need to edit. So you can see here that I kind of made this part a little too thick. So I can take my eraser in and erase out parts of it, and then fix the thickness of those lines. This really comes in handy if somebody writes with like a marker or a pen that might, you know, have an ink blot here or there, and you really, really have to capture those quirks. When you're writing with just, you know, a ballpoint pen, sometimes it is more consistent than that. But the more you do, the more comfortable you'll get with kind of mimicking those shapes and figuring out like the pressure and where to press down on and where not to.
So does stabilization kind of smooth out the line as you're drawing?
Yes.
Where it doesn't look a little...
Yes, because my hands shake so bad that if I didn't have stabilization on, my lines would be like this. And so
But I thought your stabilization was at 0.
or the streamline under stabilization, I'm sorry. The streamline is what helps do the smoothing. The stabilization, I'm pretty sure, does similar, but I've never messed with that one myself.
So if I turn, so we are at 70 now, so if I turn it up more, it'll be more stable, like it...
It'll make it a little bit, it's almost like it smooths out your curves as you're going. And so you don't want to necessarily have it at 100 because then you can't capture all of the like small, like, you know, quirks that the handwriting might have. But you can play with the different levels of it and see what feels best to you as you go. I just like to have it on because I feel like it, even if it's just a placebo effect, it makes me feel better. I feel like it does really make my lines smoother. I went into my layers and then tapped with 2 fingers on the layer that has the trace on it, and then just slide up and down.
Okay, let me ask you this question because I've done this 2 or 3 times already and I just did it again. I accidentally did it on the background. Is there a way to like, can we put this on a new one?
So you can. let me.
This is like the 4th time I've done it.
Yeah,
I do it every time, even though I've created a new layer.
I do it all the time too.
Okay.
If you catch it quickly and you can just undo and do it after 1 letter, that's probably the best solution. But you can use your, it's the 3rd icon at the top, the little S. And then you can do automatic when that bottom window pops up. And then if you click on what you just drew, and then kind of like keep the pen on there and drag it to the right a little bit, so it selects all of the pixels that are around it. You don't want to go too far because then it'll select the whole background, but so slide it till it kind of looks like this one does. Then if you take 3 fingers and swipe down, it brings up your copy and paste menu, and you can do duplicate, and what that'll do is it'll bring it to a new layer. So you might have a couple things to, you know, smooth out if it gets a little bit pixelated, but it gives you the majority of what you did that you can bring to a new layer. That's the one main reason that if you do want to lock your reference layer, that way you can't draw on it, and it'll force you to be on the layer above it.
I locked it and it still let me draw on it.
Let me see.
Unless I undid the lock by accident.
Yeah. See, mine tells me that it's locked. It might have been if you tapped the screen with your fingers, it could have undid it.
I must have done that. Okay.
But so yeah, that's a good example. Thank you. That was not planned, but that was great. No, you are totally fine. But that's a good example of why it can be helpful to lock that reference layer. Okay, let me just get my last. All right, mine's not perfect, but oops, my A is gone now. All right, so here I just have my text that I did, and if I wanted to take this text and take it right into my laser program, the way that I would export it is to go back into my layers and turn off my background color, which is just that white background. There's a little checkbox next to it. So I would tap that, so now the background is transparent, and I would go over to my actions menu, that wrench icon, and go to share, and then just click PNG. And depending on whether you work with Macs and you can just airdrop this to your computer, or whether you work with something like Xtool where you can do it right on your iPad, you would save it or send it wherever you need it to go. But if I did need to come in here and do an image trace, if I wanted to make a keychain that had my text, I would definitely not use my handwriting saying Procreate, but you could come into Illustrator and just do a really quick trace of the text that you did, which if I tried to image trace the photo I took of this piece of paper, it would not come out clean at all. Let me show you the manual trace that I just did as a vector versus vectorizing that.
And the app that you're in now is?
Illustrator. You can use any vector app. I just like to use Illustrator because it's right on my iPad and I can go back and forth. But just to give you a, oops, the picture didn't save. Let's see.
And now Illustrator for the iPad is still not the same as Illustrator on your computer, correct?
Correct. There are things that you can't do. There are some workarounds, and there are ways to kind of get the same effect that it has, but there are certain capabilities like the shape builder does not work the same. So I like to use both. I'll start on my iPad and then go to my laptop and do it there. But it's just all about what the end goal is for what you need. It's gonna make me look bad and do a perfect, okay, no. So here we go. It picks up the shadows, it picks up, you know, kind of the crinkles in the paper. Then you would just have to mess with the settings, go back in and see what to edit, versus tracing straight from my PNG that I just recreated. And then I can show you under out, oops, I have to expand it first. This one just came out a little bit funkier with the anchor points, the nodes, whatever you call them, depending on your program, versus over here, they're smoother, but they still capture kind of the shakiness of my hand. It's all just making it easiest for you if you need to take this over to your laser. So I say if there's something that you can make cleaner, do that step first and then go from there. But so the last thing I wanted to show you was combining a reference. No, I don't want that one. Okay, so I am actually currently making bracelets for two of my cousins that have both of our grandparents, like a message on them. And so we have my grandmother's handwriting that says love you, and we were gonna do the same from my grandfather. But my one cousin said that he used to call her Allie Kazoo. I don't know where it came from, but that was like his nickname for her. And so she wanted to know if I could figure out a way to do that in his handwriting. So this is a note that he wrote her sister, and I can go through and use my selection tool to take the letters that I need to make that, and then I can engrave it on her bracelet. So if I can find, here's a double O, oops. It has to be on freehand, that's the lasso tool. Here's the double O, and then I do that 3-finger swipe down and duplicate, and it gives me that on a whole new layer. And then I'd wanna find an A, so this has an A and an L, which works because that's how she spells Allie. And I just need an I and then a K and a Z, right? She just asked me this yesterday, so it was perfect timing. I need an I. I'll go right here. And then a Z, which I wasn't sure I was going to be able to find, but worked out well. A-L-I. Okay, so then I've got all my pieces, right? And they're all out of order, they look crazy, but I can go in here and take them and organize them so that it looks like I have a reference that I can use. Oops, I still need an A. That's what I missed. And then as you're kind of layering them, if you need to get rid of any of it, you can erase it, you can adjust it, you can change the size. But so I could take this, trace it, and now I have exactly what she wanted on her bracelet, and it's a special memory that she shared with our grandfather, and then she'll have my grandmother's handwriting on the other side. So being able to take one simple reference, or even if you have a grocery list, and turn it into something that's going to be meaningful for people is something that I think is so valuable in our industry, and not every business can do that. So I just thought that was something I could show you real quick, that you just have to have, even if you have them write out the alphabet, you can go and pick out what you need. And so on the same kind of concept, there are a couple other things that are very much similar in terms, they might not be handwriting, but things like footprints, handprints, dog nose prints, thumbprints. I see a lot of that engraved on jewelry blanks. And I've seen people do ornaments with baby footprints and, you know, there was a trend for a while where they had the painted signs that said, "You're the best, hands down." If people don't want their kids to be messy, you can engrave the handprints for them, and then it looks a little bit more, you know, high end, but it's still something their kids did. You just get those ink pads and they send you a black and white picture. You can trace it, and then you can turn it into like a fancier keepsake that, you know, adds value and makes it something that they'll cherish. This is my daughter's footprint, and so the only picture I had of the paper, you can tell, I'm pretty sure there's a hair on the picture. It's dark, it's splotchy. This is what happened when I tried to do the image trace in Adobe. So it did not do what I wanted. And whether I was going to cut it or engrave it, there's kind of, you can figure out how much detail you want. These were the two versions that I traced. And so I just traced the outline of the toes of the foot, and then did that color drop, that paint bucket technique we talked about, to fill it in. And now I have something that I could easily turn into a vector if needed, or could engrave just like this. And once you get comfortable and you know which brushes to go to, you know how to add your layers, it only takes minutes. And it's something that can elevate your products, and you can offer something that's more high value and something that, you know, custom things sell. There is such a market for it. In the same vein, I do a lot of portraits, I do house traces, I just like to draw. That's my part of the laser world, is I like to do the drawing. And so I can take a photograph and trace on the photo to turn things into a keepsake. So for this one, this was a friend of mine who was terrified of dogs her entire life. Her sister got a puppy and she fell in love, and she was like, I need a Sadie ornament right now. And so I drew her sister's dog, added some snowflakes that I drew in Procreate using the symmetry tool that we'll talk about, and then engraved it on an ornament, and she was all set and she loved it. The one on the right was a cake topper. So I drew those flowers and then just put my coworker's grandbaby on top of it, and we made a cute little cake topper. And then the one on the left, I did a house trace for a friend of mine as a Christmas gift. So these were all done with that studio pen. You don't need anything fancy. I just put the picture as the background and traced over the parts of it that stood out to me. And it's all the same concepts. Once you get comfortable in the program, you can apply it to anything. These were two examples of my nephew, so I made ornaments of him. I did him as he was for the one trace, and then I added a Santa hat and an ornament for another version. I teach a line art class, and so that was my take on this is how you can do selective editing, kind of like how we do combining references of the handwriting. You can combine picture images as well and do the same concept where you trace the main elements and combine things. If you want to get into more of the drawing, I use Procreate to draw all of my engraving designs. So I do notebooks, I do tumblers, I do, you know, sign backers. These florals would be perfect for like a nursery name sign or something. That's all done using that studio pen brush. I don't use anything fancy. I just use that brush in black and white, and then I turn it into a vector file if I'm gonna be, you know, selling the file. And it's all just using Procreate. Simple. You can add a reference, you can just freehand, whatever you're comfortable with, but then you can take that right into your laser program and engrave it. I also like to do 3D line art, and this is where I use that monoline brush. This is the one that's in the picture. It is me and my husband on our wedding day, and I engraved our wedding song around it. And the other one is a flower design I did for a local business to hang in her physical therapy office. But that's all done using that monoline brush. And for the flowers, I went on Unsplash, which is like a royalty-free site that you can use as reference images. Found a bunch of flowers, traced the flowers with that pen, and then, you know, did my cleanup, made it look pretty, and then cut it on the laser. So you can, with just 2 brushes in a $12.99 program, you can make so many different things. I also do what I call mosaic files, and these are my faux stained glass pieces that I am obsessed with. So I do all sorts of acrylic art. This is my dog and my twin's dog. This one is just a mountain scene. They're all done with that one brush. I just do the line art drawing, and then once I vector it, it's ready to go into the laser. And I can use Illustrator just to like separate out the inside pieces into different colors. So these 2 brushes that are included in the program with minimal adjustments have made all of these different things. You can also use it to create mock-ups. So if you have a drawing that you've done, or you have a SVG that you can do a PNG export and put that in Procreate, you can do that color drop to say, okay, this is gonna be painted pink, this is gonna be painted blue, and you can make yourself mock-ups to follow. I mean, I don't always quite stick to them when I do it, for me. For clients I do. But, you know, you can give yourself a vision of what your project's going to look like. There are just so many uses to this program in addition to just tracing. If you do logos, how many people in here do logo signs or logo projects? If there's a logo that has, you know, thick lettering that needs consistent width, or something that's in script that you can't find the font for, the 2 brushes that we did today are perfect for recreating it. So I'll show you on the Riley Black. I took a screenshot from her website because I wanted to show you the quality that sometimes our clients don't understand when you say, I need a good quality file to go off of. This is just a screenshot. And when I do a vector trace of it, can you imagine the amount of anchor points that are going to occur? You're gonna look at me like I'm insane. Okay, so we've got it on color, and I'm just gonna expand. Do you see those blue squiggles? Who wants to take that and put it in the laser? What I did is I traced it in Procreate. I used the monoline brush for the black lettering, and I used the studio brush for the rest of it. And it's not perfect, but it is so much cleaner when we do our trace that there's only minimal editing that has to be done versus the craziness of the other version. So if I put it back in our outline view, you can see how much cleaner that is versus this. So if you have a logo project and you're struggling, you can't get a good trace using your vector program, put it in Procreate, recreate a clean version of it, and then you can turn it into a vector and it'll be so much easier to work with. I also did the same thing for my twin. They have a video game development company that they do, and so this on the left side, their dog looks kind of like an alien. He has 2 different color eyes and his ears go like this. And so he was like, all right, Scott's gonna be my mascot. I took this version. There was no, hey, do you have a black and white line art I can trace? And they were like, no, why would I have had that? So I drew it in Procreate and then printed it, scored it on a piece of wood, and we had a paint night as a family, and that was their project. So it turned out really cute. I kept the same thick lines that were in the original, and it was something that, knowing I had these tools in Procreate, that I could recreate this logo that easily, made it so much easier. All I had to do was I turned it into a vector to do the cut line, and he was all set with being able to paint it. And that was all done with that monoline brush. You can also use it if you are somebody who wants to design files. You can sketch your own file and then take that and clean it up. You can write notes to yourself if you have a project that you're working on and someone calls you and you don't have paper. Just bring up a screenshot of it and take notes of what they want you to change. It's literally like having endless paper in front of you. But for this one, I used a sketch brush for the actual like sketch part, and then I cleaned it up with that studio pen, and then I took that into Adobe and traced it manually with the pencil tool so that I have a version I can engrave and then a version that I can sell as a single line file to makers that like to do that shaping with the Dremel. And so I did do the manual tracing. Seems like an extra step, but it gives you that single line, which is so important to a lot of makers.
So the single line, you have to, once you create it, then you have to go take it in Adobe and use the pencil tool to,
Yeah.
there's no way to do the pencil
You
tool
can,
in Procreate.
no. So Procreate being a raster program, being based in pixels, when you go to convert it, the computer is always going to see both sides of the line, no matter how thin it is. So even if you use it at, 1% size, it's still gonna say there is a black line here, I need to trace the whole thing. And so it'll have that double line effect that so many people ask questions about. And I know a lot of people say, oh, just do center line trace, just delete out the inside portion. I am of the opinion that it's easier to just put your image as lock it in Adobe and trace right on top with that pencil tool, because then there's so much less editing that has to go into it. They haven't mastered the centerline trace yet, and when you do it, sometimes it comes out really wonky and your points turn into squiggles like spaghetti, and I don't love it. So for me, I'll do the version that I want for an engraving design and then just trace it manually and adjust the anchor points with the pencil tool.
CorelDRAW has a really good centerline trace feature.
Do they? I've never used it,
The
but
only good thing about CorelDRAW.
I've been scared to dive into that one, but I might have to check it out.
The price is the other one.
Yeah. But for that one was just, using all the brushes. I did mention briefly that there's a symmetry tool. What you can do is you can set up your canvas in Procreate to automatically mirror your design. And so these 3 pictures here all use the symmetry tool. And I will show you. So if you come back into Procreate under your canvas options, about halfway down there's something called drawing guide, and there's a little toggle that you can turn on, and then you just click on edit drawing guide, and this is all in your PDF as well. You can come down to on this bottom menu to select symmetry, and then there's an options menu which says if you want vertical, horizontal, quadrant, or radial symmetry. And so the radial symmetry is if you'd like to draw, if you want to do a flower that's symmetrical, or mandalas, or anything that radiates out from the center. Or you can do vertical symmetry, and it'll take what you draw on one side of the canvas onto the other. So if you're trying to draw a heart and you can't get the perfect shape, you can just turn on your symmetry, and it mirrors it automatically for you. And so this is really great, but sometimes I have to remind myself, if you're going to do a part of the drawing that doesn't need symmetry, you can either add another layer and that won't have the assist, or you can tap on the layer and tap on where it says drawing assist, and that turns it off so that you can go in and add elements that are not mirrored. So, I mean, for this one here, I did mirrored for the arches and for the moon and the stars, and then I turned off the mirroring and did everything else by hand. So it really comes in handy for a lot of different things. Oops. Okay, when would I not use Procreate? The single line designs that we were just talking about. This is something I did for Laser Craft Fest to show the difference between a design that is drawn in a raster program versus a vector program. The one on the top is drawn in Procreate, and I did an image trace of it, and it, as you can tell, has this double like outline look to it. In order to get it to look like the bottom, that was drawn directly in a vector program. So I drew it right in Adobe, and I used the pencil tool, and all I have to do is just use the node editing tools. I like to use the direct selection tool and just line everything up, and it looks pretty. There isn't really an easy way to take the top one to the bottom unless you're using Corel Draw, which I have not tried. So when you need something to have that single line look, or you're planning on doing a scoring file or a cut file that you need all the pieces to butt up next to each other and be really snug, you want to go directly to your vector program. There are ways to get around it, but I think it's just so much easier to start there.
So really, the best option for the iPad is Illustrator.
Yeah, you can't use Inkscape on the iPad. Does Corel Draw have iPad?
I don't think so.
I don't know. I know there's Affinity. I've never used that one. I have it downloaded, but I've never tried it. But I personally just think Illustrator is worth it. But so this is what I mean by those single line designs. They're all pieces that match right up to each other. She can shape them and put them back together. That's Lauren from Barley and Oak. And then this is my version of those dragons, and it has that thick outline that I did in Procreate, where all I had to do was just turn the outline into a vector, break apart the compound path, and I had all the pieces. But so there's a very different look in those two styles, and so depending on your end use, if you want that single line file, if you want to get into shaping with a Dremel, that's the time you would use a vector program first and maybe skip Procreate. I would also not use it for projects where you need really precise measurements. I would stick with your vector program. I would stick with something where you can, I mean, Illustrator has that tool where you can literally click at 2 points and it tells you the measurement. I would have no idea where to start in Procreate with that. Anything that needs sharp angles, because in Procreate, even your squares kind of tend to have rounded corners. Anything that's 3D or that you need like to do math, I would steer clear of Procreate. But there's also times where it works really beautifully with a vector program. So these are designs that I started in Procreate or Illustrator and then swapped. The first one, this bearded dragon, I did the character in Illustrator, and I did the backer, which is this pattern with animal print and paw prints in Procreate, and so then I paired them together, and it turned out really cute. I run like a bookish merch shop as well, and it's like fantasy themed, and so I drew all these characters in Procreate, took them into Adobe, turned them into vectors, and then just cut it out of my background for my sign. So that was an example of how those two would work really well together. And then for this one, I did the cardinal in Procreate and did everything else in Illustrator. But once you get comfortable with both programs, and once you figure out how to take, you know, your Procreate image into Illustrator, or if you're doing mock-ups and take your Illustrator image into Procreate, they work really beautifully together. And I don't think a lot of people realize how seamlessly they can work together. But that's basically what I've got for you all. I think that Procreate is definitely like underutilized. You can do just about anything with it. It can create some really, really beautiful work. And if you have an iPad, I say take the $13 and give it a try. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
For the people that do like really pretty handwriting that's not traced, but
Yes.
like, is there something in
So in Procreate, they actually have a whole section on like calligraphy brushes. And so when you're doing the hand lettering, most of the time you want something that has like that tapered look that isn't that consistent thickness. And that's where the pressure sensitivity comes in handy, because you can, on the downstroke, press down. I mean, I'm terrible at script, but you know, you can press down for the thick parts and then lift up for the thinner parts. And as they would do it on a piece of paper, they would just do the same thing with those brushes and the pressure. And it allows for some really beautiful hand lettering. It is not my strong suit at all, but it is definitely possible. Yes.
What do you recommend getting your file from Procreate to your desktop?
What kind of desktop do you have?
Just have a Windows.
I use Google Photos, and I have the app on my iPad, so every photo that I save goes right into that, and then I can just keep a window of Google Photos open and just save the PNG to my computer that way. And honestly, it works really well. I've never had any issues with it, so yeah.
The house that you did, I've seen the ones where they do like the elevation.
Mhm.
Do you just add like extra part in there?
For that one, I would probably do that in a vector program, just so that everything you do lines up and you can use that like outline view to make sure all your layers are matching. But if you wanted to do like the details on the top with that, you could take export a PNG from your vector program, put it in Procreate, and then draw on top of that to give you that element. But I think it would probably be beneficial to you to have somewhere where you can see it line up perfectly like that in the vector program.
What are you drawing in Illustrator with? Are you using?
The pencil. So I go in, so I use the Apple Pencil, and then I use the pencil tool itself. And for anybody who is going to try the pencil tool, there is something very similar to that streamline option that we did. It's got smoothing, and I keep mine on 3 or 4, and it does the same thing. It makes your hands, you know, the curves are rounder. I know that sounds redundant, but they're smoother and it makes it easier to draw, whereas if you have it completely off, it'll pick up every movement. And so I did want to share, I don't know why this keeps going back to the beginning. This is where you can find me. I have a file club. We do monthly themed drops. The moth design that was in there is actually going to be September's file. One of the September files. And anybody, there's 3 tiers in my file club. Anybody who's in the gold tier, which is $25 a month, gets access to all of my courses for as long as their subscription is active. So I teach Adobe Illustrator. I teach how to make these acrylic mosaics and all about acrylic. And in that one, I vector in Illustrator, Silhouette, Inkscape, and Lightburn. And then I also have a line art portrait class. And I did have a code up here for anybody that attended that did want to look at those for 50% off. The portrait class that I mentioned, this is one of the projects that I go over how to do like the line art trace like that. I talk about what to look at when you're tracing an image, like what you can kind of ignore and how to make things look recognizable. And with that being 50% off, it's $25. So that coupon code goes through next Friday. And the QR code here just takes you to my website, which has all of my info. If you ever have questions about Procreate or about Illustrator, you can tell I like to talk about it, so I'm happy to help. Is there any other questions?
Is it returning? Can you throw up the?
I can, yes. Is everyone done with this screen? This is, for anyone who didn't get it, that is your PDF cheat sheet for Procreate. And it'll take you to Google Drive, and it just has the different menus and what they do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And if you all wouldn't mind, there is a survey that Will and Mark have put out that you should probably have seen this a million times by now. It's on your programs as well. Just leave some feedback for us. Let us know what we could do better, what you liked, and we would greatly appreciate it. Thank you.